Hi guys, my name is Jacob. Welcome to Adobe Pro Tips. We're going to be continuing on from yesterday, working in Illustrator and building out a product for a client. Today we're focusing on rulers and it's going to be a ton of fun. So let's just hop into it, get started and see what we can do. Where we left off, we had our character built out, which is great, a great place to leave off on. And now we're at the point where we would be wanting to work with setting up the product for the client. In this case, the product that we're going to be making for this client is going to be a menu. When it comes to menus, the overall layout and style is very important for your design process as well as being print ready. And a lot of people will reference, say, InDesign or Photoshop for those types of layouts. But in this case, for me, I love to have a hands-on process, and I'm a little more familiar with Illustrator than I am with InDesign. So I figured let's show the best way to build out those print-ready lines and print-ready products for these clients, all native to the app that you're building out these characters in as well. Hopping straight into it, really the first place and the first thing we want to do is we want to bring out the rulers tool. You can either do that by going to view rulers and show rulers, or you can just use that shortcut Command R. When you're building out your product for your client, it is very dependent on what sizing and shapes that this specific product is. In this case, we're kind of lucky, maybe by convenience or design, that our setup is a very simple 4 by about 1.5 or 2.5 by 10 inches. So this is pretty standard when it comes to menus for restaurants or for cafes, in this case, a cafe. And when we're using those multiplication or division to figure out where pieces go where, it can be incredibly useful for that process. The first thing I'd like to do when I am working with a client or working with a print company is figure out, are there going to be any bleed lines? And in this case, for most printing, there will be some form of bleed for these menus. So what I like to do is work on my bleed first. If you've ever worked with rulers before, especially in Illustrator, it's incredibly easy. You can just take your cursor, go over to the left side of the screen, pull it over, and you'll have your ruler set up. Very easy. I'm just going to Control Z that as well. If you want to get rid of it in any other way, you can cut it out, you can paste it in. There's plenty of different ways that you can interact with it. In this case, we're wanting to lock in on these specific sizes and make sure everything is symmetrical, because obviously this is going to be print ready. So we just want to hold down Shift and bring over these rulers. You can see them snapping. In this case, for our design, and I'm using a little reference to the right of me, we're wanting to go about maybe 1/4 of an inch out from the end of our artboard. Same on the other side. We'll just do about 1/4 of an inch out. So we already have our two rulers down or two markers down, just to kind of give us an idea for the left and right bleed. And we'll just do the same for the top. Let's see, we'll cut that out and drop this down with 1/4, just about, and down here with 1/4. So already we have our bleed lines down. We know what we can be working in, what space we have in order to build out this menu for this client, and it's great. So we can kind of start moving stuff around, getting a general idea of what we need to do. Obviously, we're going to want our logo up in the very top, because that's going to be where people tend to gravitate towards first, and read from left to right, and then top to bottom, at least for English speakers. And we can just bring this up like this. So kind of get it in a general idea. We want to stay within that bleed space like we talked about. We can use the Align tool to kind of get things in order and get a general idea down. In this case, now I would want to see what exactly did the client provide me in terms of working with. So when, do I have a specific title? Do I have a logo? Do I have the, what the menu will specifically have in it? So, the food, the drinks. In this case, we do have that provided from our client. So what we'll do is we'll be kind of building off of that. So I know I have a title, I have drinks, and I have food, as well as the bottom will state what the product is, which is a menu. So I'll have about 4 sections I need to work with. In this case, I want to know my middle, my quarter, and so on and so forth. And thankfully, because this is in increments of 10, it'll be really easy. So what I'm doing here is I'm just dragging down our rulers down to the half mark, the quarter mark, which will be about here, and the bottom quarter mark, which will also be here. And already we have it split up into 4 quadrants, which is great. So we have our logo, our drinks, our menu for food, and our title. So I would want to go even further with this too, because this is something that is going to have a lot of text and a lot of information. So I'm probably going to split this up into 8s even, just to make it a little easier for me. There is no real right way to split up your guides. You can do it at whatever makes you comfortable and whatever makes the most sense to you, because this is for your convenience only. So kind of get a general idea down. These snapping guides as well too. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to eyeball because we might be in between these lines, these guides. So go about here, here, and here. And what I really like with the guides with Illustrator as well, in comparison to say like Photoshop, is just having everything in my layers panel over here is very, very helpful. I think that's something that, at least for me, tends to kind of break up the process a little bit differently. So what I'll do is I'll just drop my character down and kind of get a general idea of where I'm looking at. And as I said before, we do have the title already provided to us by our client. The name of this company that we're working with our client is called Night Shift. We were already provided a font setup for this specific portfolio, or for this specific product, I should say. So I'm going to go ahead and work with that. For our client, in this case, they wanted to use a mix of multiple fonts, which I think is super fun. So we're just coming in here with the fat font inline, and we need to grab a serif font, which I'm just looking at my reference here, maybe something like this. Perfect. And we'll add a little more to that just for the bottom half. We want this to be able to fit within our margins and look comfortable and not kind of like squeezed in. So we're definitely going to be kind of manipulating and shaping things as we see fit, kerning, all those things when it comes to typeface as well. So we'll just drop this down a little bit, and we'll scale this accordingly to our margins. And especially with these samples, say like if we're working generally with a client and we want to get a general idea down, I like to kind of just work with the flow, go by eye, and work out the specific, I guess, the details of it later. So like if we're wanting to bring it a little bit further up, a little bit further down, we want to make sure that we're still working within these margins and that things are all symmetrical, but we like to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room as well, right? So we've got our general menu down, the name of the company itself, and now we're wanting to move on to what the company will be serving. So we'll start with drinks. For the drinks, I think with this setup for these margins, I definitely want to have kind of a 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch space between these characters or these sections. So between the Night Shift, about this much space, which is great for us. So what I'll do is I'll make sure to use that same font that we're using here before and kind of jot down some of these items that we be serving, or this menu will be serving. So they have hot tea, chai lattes, and hot chocolate. And for this too, you'll probably notice I'm pretty strategically placing my shapes, or I should say my fonts and my lines for these characters. That's just because I'm thinking in mind of how they're going to be stacking and how they will be fitting in those margins. So say for, whoops, this space between the $3 hot and chocolate, I'm going to want to bring that spacing a little bit closer. We can go ahead and scale these up to kind of get a general idea of our spacing. So far, I'm liking that. Wanting to put a little more space between the $3 and the chai. And really with this, it's a lot of trial and error. It's kind of working with the space that you have and figuring out what fits best for your specific project, because this can change across multiple different projects. Let's see, bring up that character tab again. There we go. Just like that. So looking at the distance between the hot and the chai, got about 50 points. And then from the hot tea and the chai latte, we got about 50 points. We'll just make that rounded up. So we're still staying within the symmetrical side. Obviously, if we're wanting to fit in between this margin and this margin, we're going to want to bring it down a little bit more, which is just going to take a little more adjusting. So we'll go in here and maybe adjust this down to about, well, let's see, we'll actually go here. We'll adjust this down to maybe about, I would say maybe 38 feels good for what we're trying to do. And we'll make sure to match that. 38. Triple check, perfect. So what we'll do is we'll kind of get this centered with our margins, get everything lined up, looking nice, give ourselves a little bit of room on the left. Honestly, with those bleed lines, we might be able to line up that box perfectly. And now we have the left side of our menu done. We can kind of zoom back and kind of get an idea. I should say the left side of our drink menu done. And we're going to want to add a few more things in there just because that's what the client is looking for. So we'll just for the sake of convenience, copy this over, match up the bounds. And if you're unsure of eyeballing the bounds like I am, you can just use that alignment tool. Make sure everything's aligned. Perfect. We'll want to have that same amount of distance between these characters. And what we can do just to make sure our glyph box is aligned with the right side is we can just use this alignment tool or the paragraph tool and bring this over. Doing some strategic spacing. Perfect. And for here, we're just going to add some more drinks to this list, which is a London Fog. And just regular black coffee. Perfect. I want to match up these distances between each other. So the best way to do that is just by going into here and checking our distance, which I believe will be like this. Yep, 17.98. So we can just copy this over. Looks like our distance changed a little bit. Characters, yeah, 17.98. Perfect. We'll just go through here and do the same. Character distance, we'll do 17.98. Perfect. So yep, now I've got everything lined up, ready to go, and our drink section is pretty much done. This was super quick. I mean, it was very set up to where we can just work within our lines. And, you know, if we're doing this with no rulers at all, this could end up taking a lot longer than what we would want. And, you know, now we have some working room to kind of get an idea of how much we want the spacing to look like, what else we need to add in here. And in this case, I'm really liking the spacing. I'm liking this kind of 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch gap between our title and our drinks. So next up will be our food. So what's being served at this restaurant or this cafe? What do we need to put in here? Thankfully, again, our client has provided us with what they're going to be serving. And in this case, if I don't have information, say like ingredients or like specifics of where things are being sourced or if something's vegan or not, I like to put in a sample in there. In this case, we don't have the ingredients for that specific menu item. So we will just add sample as a general note. Same with our prices as well. We can add sample in kind of wherever we need. Even with the title itself, we tend to do that. I should say I tend to do that. So we'll kind of try to match up by eye that space between those margins, and we'll start filling out our food items. Now with the food items, just because this is a completely separate part of the menu, I kind of want to change the sizing and the overall distance between these items. So what I'll do is I'm gonna make these nice, big, and bold for the food, just for some contrast in the menu itself. What I'm doing right now, just to kind of get that distance between these characters, I'm using the Tab key and kind of working with my space. So what we'll do is we'll line up these glyphs. Perfect. And we'll use that same technique of spacing. So let's work with just this. The reason I like using these end characters is tends to give us a bit more breathing room to just adjust the space between the characters, not necessarily between the characters and not the text itself, so the open space. In this case, I'm going to be using kind of a mix between the spacebar and the kerning tool. Might be able to bring this up to match, holding shift to make sure everything's scaled. That's perfect. I'm really liking how that looks right now. We're in our space, we're not bleeding over into our margins, and we're still able to kind of work out how we're wanting to. So what I want to do just to make sure that everything is aligned is I'm just going to be copying and pasting these same menu items. They're going to be changed, but this just adds for a little extra layer of consistency across our menu. So what I'll do is I'll just plug in these other items for the menu using that space bar to kind of give us a general idea where we want to be. It's about good. And do the same here. Price. And if things are looking a little funky, so say like with the spacing here, what we can do, like I said before, is just kern these characters to fit more accurately with our top. And I am just doing this by eye. Perfect. So now we're getting things to kind of match up, and obviously we're going to want our ingredients for these specific menu items. So we'll just go into this text box, click enter, and we can start jotting down our ingredients. For the ingredients, this is going to be the piece that is, or I should say, this is going to be the part of the menu that is going to have the least amount of attention. Obviously, we want it to be readable, but we want it to be a little bit smaller, even smaller than the drinks themselves, because the drinks are specific menu items. So what we'll do, since we don't have those, we're just going to pop in sample a few times. And we'll highlight these, go to our character tab, and just drop the spacing between that and the character size by a lot. See if we can get about here. Perfect. And we'll want to adjust our other menu items accordingly with this spacing, just because we're starting to kind of move out of that bounding box, but that is totally okay because these are things that we can adjust along the way. I'll give myself a little bit more room, about 10. And we're just following these guidelines, following in the general direction of what we have so far. Perfect. So we're wanting to be above these. So what we'll do is same technique using this space. Just drop this down to about 0.1. I believe we can do the same with this. One, which gives us a little more space. And looking at this, I'm liking how it's going, and I can bring this down to center in our alignment box, but at least for this demonstration, I am wanting to kind of work in this space specifically and utilize as much space as possible, give us that spacing so I can just kind of mess around and kind of get a general idea of how far I can push this. So we'll just highlight this and we'll push this up maybe by 8. We'll push this one up by about 8. Let's see. So we're getting closer. We're getting closer to what we're looking for. We'll go up 8 more. Just working in increments, making sure that we have enough space. We're still staying within our margins. So this is much closer to what I'm looking for. I'm liking the spacing in between these two, the top and the bottom. I'm just going to eyeball and kind of give us a little, I should say, the same amount of breathing room for the top and the bottom. There we go. We have our second part of our menu completely done. And really, this kind of leads us to the last bit of the menu itself, which is, in my opinion, the most fun, and that's labeling what the menu is. It's going to be a menu. So at the bottom, we want to put that it is a menu. We'll do the same technique as we did before, just giving that little bit of space, like so. We'll eyeball it a little bit. Perfect. And we'll get our text down. So we'll go ahead and drop text in. And like I said before, our client is going to be wanting to use multiple different texts across this project. So we'll do and I like to use these opportunities too if the client does give us some options. to kind of give myself some options as well to see, do I like this more? Do I like this more? What feels correct? What feels wrong? So in this case, say with this menu at the bottom, does it look better with, I know this probably looks a little crazy. There we go. So does this look better with our big bouncy font on the left side or the right side? I'll scale this to be within the specific bounds of this margin. What I like to do, especially with clients that are looking for more fun, kind of like playful typeface, I like to stretch out my typeface every once in a while. So we'll stretch this out like so. And I'm liking this setup a little more than the other one. And that pretty much does it for our menu setup. So what we can do is we can just group all of these margins together, label them, get rid of them. And now we have a perfectly good menu for our cafe. This is all within our bounding boxes, all within our lines, and it took us only about half an hour. And that's pretty much all you need. So I hope you enjoyed this demonstration. It was, super fun. Make sure that you tune in to some more Adobe live streams today and tune back in with us tomorrow to continue this project and go on further with our product for our client. Thanks, guys.